I never expected my straight neighbour to invite me to Thanksgiving. We'd been living next door to each other for about 8 months, exchanging those polite hallway nods and the occasional small talk about parking spots or package deliveries. His name was Miles, and honestly, I'd been nursing this quiet, impossible crush on him since the day he helped me carry groceries up the stairs during a rainstorm. He had this effortless warmth about him, the kind that made you feel seen, even in the most mundane moments. But I'd buried those feelings deep because Miles was straight. He'd mentioned an ex-girlfriend once, talked about her casually while we were both checking our mail, so I did what I always do. I appreciated him from a safe distance, kept things friendly but surface level, and tried not to think about the way his laugh made my chest tighten. The invitation came on a Tuesday evening, 3 days before Thanksgiving. I was coming home from work, exhausted and ready to collapse on my couch with leftover Chinese food, when I heard his door open. Miles stepped into the hallway wearing a faded college sweatshirt and jeans, his hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He had this nervous energy about him that I'd never seen before. "Hey, Adrian," he said, and I remember thinking it was the first time he'd said my name in weeks. "Got a minute?" I nodded, my heart doing that stupid thing where it speeds up for no logical reason. He leaned against his doorframe, and I noticed he was fidgeting with his keys. "So this is probably weird," he started, "but I'm going to my parents' place for Thanksgiving. It's about 2 hours north, and my mum always does this huge traditional dinner thing. She invited my sister and her husband, my cousin, the whole extended family situation." He paused, and I waited, completely confused about where this was going. "The thing is," he continued, "I mentioned you to her a few weeks ago. Just in passing, you know, talking about my neighbour who's actually cool to talk to, and now she's insisting I bring you. She said any friend of mine is welcome at the table, and she won't take no for an answer." I stood there in the hallway, my work bag sliding off my shoulder, trying to process what he'd just said. He'd mentioned me to his mother. He'd called me a friend, which shouldn't have felt like such a significant word, but it did. "I don't want to make things weird," Miles added quickly, clearly misreading my silence. "If you have plans or if it's too much, I totally get it. It's just, I don't know. I thought maybe you'd want to come. My mum's cooking is legitimately amazing and it beats eating alone." The assumption that I'd be alone stung a little, even though it was accurate. My own family was across the country, and I'd already resigned myself to a quiet Thanksgiving with a Stouffer's turkey dinner and whatever was on Netflix. But the idea of spending the holiday with Miles, of stepping into his family's world, felt both thrilling and terrifying. What would his family think? Would they clock me as gay immediately? Would it be awkward? Would I spend the whole day hyper-aware of every gesture, every word, trying not to reveal the feelings I'd worked so hard to hide? "Yeah," I heard myself say. "That sounds really nice, actually, thank you." The smile that broke across Miles's face was genuine and relieved, and I felt something shift in my chest. It was like a door I'd been keeping carefully locked had cracked open just slightly. He gave me the details. We'd leave Wednesday afternoon to beat the traffic, stay overnight at his parents' house, and drive back Friday morning. "Pack casual," he said. "My family's pretty laid back, it's not fancy or anything." That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what I'd just agreed to. I'd be spending an entire holiday weekend with Miles, sleeping under the same roof, meeting the people who shaped him. The rational part of my brain screamed that this was a terrible idea, that I was setting myself up for heartbreak. But another part, the part that had been lonely for longer than I wanted to admit, felt something that might have been hope. Wednesday afternoon arrived with clear skies and unusually warm weather for late November. Miles knocked on my door at 2 o'clock sharp, and when I opened it, he was holding 2 coffees from the place down the street. "Figured we'd need fuel for the drive," he said, handing me one. He'd remembered that I took mine with oat milk and 1 sugar, a detail I'd mentioned once in passing months ago. We loaded our bags into his car, and as we pulled out of the parking garage, I felt the city falling away behind us. The first hour of the drive was easy, comfortable. We talked about work, about the new restaurant that had opened on our block, about a podcast we'd both been listening to. Miles had this way of asking questions that made you want to share more than you intended. He wasn't just making conversation, he was genuinely curious, leaning into the discussion with his full attention, even while navigating highway traffic. Then, as we merged onto a quieter stretch of road, he said something that changed the entire tone of the trip. "I should probably tell you something before we get there." My stomach dropped. Here it comes, I thought. The disclaimer. The reminder that this was just a friendly gesture, nothing more. I told my mum you were important to me, he said, his eyes fixed on the road. She asked about you specifically, like she wanted to know if you were just a neighbour or actually someone I cared about. And I told her you were important. I didn't know what to say to that. The word important echoed in my head, and I found myself studying his profile, the way his jaw tensed slightly, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. Why did you say that? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He was quiet for a moment, and I watched the landscape blur past my window. Because it's true, he finally said. I know we haven't known each other that long, but you're one of the few people I actually look forward to seeing. Like, when I hear you in the hallway, I find excuses to open my door. When I'm having a rough day, I think about knocking on your door just to talk. That probably sounds pathetic, but I don't know. You matter to me. My heart was hammering so hard I was sure he could hear it. I wanted to say so many things, to tell him that I felt the same way, that he'd become the best part of my days, that I'd been falling for him in quiet moments for months. But fear held my tongue. He'd said I was important, but that didn't mean what I desperately wanted it to mean. Guys could be important to each other as friends, as brothers, as companions. It didn't have to be romantic. You're important to me too, I managed to say, and the words felt both insufficient and too revealing at the same time. He glanced over at me then, just briefly, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read, something vulnerable and searching. Then he smiled, that easy smile that always made me feel warm, and turned his attention back to the road. Good, he said softly. I'm glad. We arrived at his parents' house just as the sun was starting to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. It was a 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and a garden that even in late November looked carefully tended. Before we could even get our bags from the trunk, the front door flew open, and a woman who had to be Miles's mother came rushing out. She was petite, with the same warm eyes as her son, wearing an apron covered in flour. "Miles," she called out, pulling him into a hug before turning to me. "And you must be Adrian. I've heard so much about you." She hugged me too, which I hadn't expected, and it was the kind of hug that made you feel instantly welcome. Come in, she said, ushering us toward the house. "Dinner won't be until tomorrow, but I made a casserole for tonight. You boys must be starving." The house smelled like cinnamon and vanilla, and it was decorated with that lived-in warmth that comes from years of family memories. Photos covered the walls, showing Miles at various ages, gap-toothed and grinning in Little League uniforms, awkward in high school graduation robes, confident and grown in more recent pictures. His father appeared from the kitchen, a tall man with greying hair and Miles's same easy smile. He shook my hand with genuine warmth and immediately started asking about my drive, my work, my thoughts on the city. They were treating me like family, and it was both comforting and confusing. Miles showed me to the guest room, which was right next door to his childhood bedroom. "You can settle in," he said, lingering in the doorway. "Bathroom's right across the hall. If you need anything, just knock." He paused, and I caught him watching me with that same unreadable expression from the car. "I'm really glad you came," he added quietly. Then he was gone, leaving me alone in a room that smelled faintly of lavender and felt too full of possibility. That evening, we ate his mother's casserole around the dining room table, while his parents asked me questions about my life, my family, my interests. They were curious, but never invasive, and I found myself relaxing into the conversation, laughing at his father's terrible jokes, and listening to his mother's stories about Miles as a child. He was such a sensitive kid, she said, her eyes soft with memory. Always the first one to notice if someone was hurting, always trying to fix things for everyone else. Miles groaned, his ears turning red. "Mum, please." But she just smiled and patted his hand. "It's a compliment, honey. That kind of heart is rare." I caught Miles looking at me across the table, and there was something in his gaze that made my breath catch, something tender and exposed. After dinner, Miles suggested we take a walk. The neighbourhood was quiet, streetlights casting long shadows across empty sidewalks. We walked without a clear destination, our hands occasionally brushing as we moved. "Sorry if my parents are a bit much," he said. "They get excited about meeting new people. They're wonderful," I said honestly. "You can tell they really love you." He smiled at that, kicking at a loose stone on the sidewalk. They do. I'm lucky that way. We walked in comfortable silence for a while, and then he said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded, my nerves suddenly alert. Have you ever told someone something important and then immediately regretted it? Not because it wasn't true, but because you were scared of how it might change things. I thought about all the feelings I'd kept locked inside, all the words I'd swallowed down. "Yeah," I said, "I know that feeling." He stopped walking and I stopped too, turning to face him under the glow of a streetlight. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, and his voice had gone quiet, serious. "And I'm terrified because I don't want to lose what we have, but I also can't keep pretending." My heart was racing and I could barely breathe. Pretending what? I asked, even though part of me already knew. Part of me had been hoping for this exact moment, even as I told myself it was impossible. "That I don't think about you constantly," he said. "That I don't look for excuses to see you. That when I invited you here, it was just as friends. The truth is, Adrian, I've been falling for you for months and I have no idea if you feel the same way, but I couldn't let this weekend pass without telling you." The world seemed to stop. Every sound faded away until all I could hear was my own heartbeat and the shaky breath Miles took as he waited for my response. "But you're straight," I said, and it came out almost like a question. He laughed, but it was nervous, vulnerable. "I thought I was," he said, "or maybe I just never let myself question it because it was easier that way. But then you moved in next door and suddenly I couldn't stop thinking about you. At first, I told myself it was just friendship, just admiration. But then I'd see you smile or hear you laugh or catch you looking at me with those eyes, and I knew it was something more. I've never felt this way about anyone, Adrian. Not my ex-girlfriend, not anyone, just you." I reached for his hand, and when our fingers intertwined, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "I've been falling for you too," I said, and saying the words out loud felt like releasing something I'd been holding too tightly for too long. I thought it was hopeless. I thought I was just setting myself up to get hurt. But Miles, you've been the best part of every single day since the moment we met. He stepped closer, and I could see the emotion swimming in his eyes. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, and his voice was barely a whisper. I answered by closing the distance between us, and when our lips met, it was soft and tentative and perfect. The kiss deepened, and I felt his hand come up to cup my face, his thumb brushing against my cheekbone. When we finally pulled apart, we were both smiling, both breathing hard, both looking at each other like we'd discovered something precious and unexpected. We walked back to his parents' house hand in hand, and the world felt different, brighter, full of possibility. That night I lay in the guest room bed, too wired to sleep, replaying every moment of the evening. Around midnight I heard a soft knock on my door. I opened it to find Miles standing there in sweatpants and an old t-shirt, looking uncertain. "Couldn't sleep," he said. "Me neither," I admitted. He stepped into the room, and we ended up sitting on the bed, talking in whispers like teenagers afraid of getting caught. We talked about everything. He told me about the first time he realized his feelings for me, how terrifying and exhilarating it had been. I told him about all the moments I'd catalogued and treasured, all the times I'd convinced myself to stop hoping. He told me he'd come out to his parents 2 weeks ago, that their response had been love and acceptance, that his mother had immediately asked about me because she'd noticed the way he talked about me. "That's why she insisted I bring you," he said. "She knew before I was ready to admit it." Thanksgiving Day arrived with the smell of roasting turkey and the sounds of family gathering. Miles's sister arrived with her husband, and his cousin showed up with a homemade pie. The house filled with laughter and conversation, and I found myself folding into the chaos with surprising ease. Miles stayed close to me throughout the day, and while we weren't openly affectionate, there were small moments. His hand on my lower back as we moved through the crowded kitchen. The way he'd catch my eye across the room and smile, the inside jokes that were already forming between us. Before dinner, his mother gathered everyone in the living room for their family tradition of sharing what they were grateful for. When it was Miles's turn, he looked directly at me. "I'm grateful for unexpected connections," he said. "For people who make you see yourself more clearly. For having the courage to be honest about what matters." His mother was beaming, and I realized she understood exactly what he meant. When it was my turn, I took a breath and said, "I'm grateful for being welcomed into this home, for people who see you and accept you exactly as you are. And I'm grateful for Miles, for his friendship and his honesty, and for making me feel less alone. His sister was grinning, clearly picking up on what was happening, and his father raised his glass with a knowing smile. The dinner was magnificent and the conversation flowed easily. I learned about Miles's childhood, about the time he tried to run away from home at age 7 and made it 3 houses down before getting homesick. I heard stories about family vacations and holiday disasters, and the time his sister accidentally set the Christmas tree on fire. They included me in everything, asked for my stories, laughed at my jokes, treated me like I belonged. After dinner, while everyone was in food comas in the living room, Miles and I volunteered to do dishes. We stood side by side at the sink, him washing and me drying, and it felt domestic and comfortable and right. "My mum really likes you," he said, handing me a soapy plate. "I like her too," I said. "Your whole family, actually. They're special." He bumped my shoulder with his. "They think you're special. My mum pulled me aside earlier and told me not to screw this up." I laughed, and he turned to face me, his hands still wet with dish soap. "I meant what I said earlier," he continued, "about being grateful for you. This whole thing is new for me, and I'm probably going to be terrible at it sometimes, but I want to try. I want to figure this out with you." I set down the dish towel and took his hands, soap and all. "We'll figure it out together," I said. "Neither of us has to have all the answers right now." He kissed me then, soft and quick but full of promise, and I heard his mother's delighted gasp from the doorway. She'd come in to check on us and caught the moment, and instead of being embarrassed, I felt relieved. No more hiding, no more pretending. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Miles knocked on my door again. We ended up lying side by side on the guest room bed, close but not quite touching, talking about the future. "What happens when we get home?" I asked. "Do we tell people? Do we keep it quiet?" "What do you want?" he countered. "I want to be able to hold your hand in the hallway," I admitted. "I want to knock on your door without an excuse. I want to stop pretending you're just my neighbour when you're so much more than that." "Then that's what we'll do," he said simply. "We'll take it at whatever pace feels right, but I don't want to hide this. I don't want to hide you." We fell asleep like that, fully clothed on top of the covers, my head on his shoulder and his arm around me. When I woke up in the early morning light, he was already awake, watching me with soft eyes. "Morning," he whispered. "Morning," I whispered back. "This is real, right?" I asked, needing confirmation that I hadn't dreamed the entire impossible weekend. He kissed my forehead. "It's real, I promise." Friday morning came too soon. We packed our bags slowly, neither of us eager to leave the bubble we'd created. His mother made us a huge breakfast and sent us home with enough leftovers to last a week. At the door, she hugged me tightly. "You're always welcome here, Adrian," she said. "Always." I could see tears in her eyes, and I realized she wasn't just accepting her son's sexuality. She was celebrating it, celebrating us. The drive home felt different from the drive up. We held hands across the center console, talking about everything and nothing. We stopped at a rest area halfway home, and Miles bought us terrible coffee and stale donuts, and somehow it felt like the best meal I'd ever had because we were together, because we could be ourselves. When we pulled into our building's parking garage, reality started to settle in. We'd have to go back to our separate apartments, back to our regular lives, but everything had changed. Miles walked me to my door, carrying my bag even though I insisted I could handle it. "So," he said, setting the bag down. "Dinner tomorrow night? My place?" "I'd love that," I said. He leaned in and kissed me, longer this time, deeper, and I didn't care that we were in the hallway where anyone could see. When we pulled apart, he was grinning. "I've wanted to do that in this hallway for months," he admitted. "Me too," I said. He started to walk toward his own door, then turned back. "Hey, Adrian." "Yeah?" "I'm really glad my mum made me invite you to Thanksgiving," I laughed. "I'm really glad I said yes." That night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the entire weekend in my mind. Just days ago, I'd been resigned to a quiet, lonely holiday. Now I had Miles, really had him, in a way I'd never let myself imagine. My phone buzzed with a text. It was Miles. "Can't stop thinking about you. Is it weird that I miss you even though you're literally 20 feet away?" I texted back immediately. "Not weird at all. I miss you too." Another text came through. "Tomorrow feels too far away. Want to watch something together? We could leave our doors open and yell commentary at each other." I smiled at my phone, at the sweetness of it, at how he was finding ways to stay connected even in the space between. "Or," I typed back, You could just come over here." He was at my door in less than a minute, wearing sweatpants and the same t-shirt from the night before, his hair messy and his smile wide. We settled on my couch, his arm around me and my head on his chest, and put on a movie neither of us paid attention to. Instead, we talked more, learning each other in ways we'd never allowed ourselves before. He told me about his fears, about how scared he'd been to acknowledge his feelings, about how relieved he felt now. I told him about my own journey, about coming out in college, about the loneliness that sometimes came with being gay in a world that wasn't always accepting. "But this," I said, gesturing between us, "this makes all of it worth it." He kissed the top of my head. "We're going to be okay," he said. "Better than okay." And he was right. The weeks that followed were a revelation. We took things slow, learning how to be together, how to navigate this new relationship. We had dinner together most nights, alternating between our apartments. We went on actual dates, holding hands in public and stealing kisses when we thought no one was looking. We introduced each other to our friends, and while there were some awkward moments and surprised reactions, mostly there was support and happiness for us. Miles was patient with himself as he navigated his new understanding of his sexuality. He read articles and books, asked questions, let himself be vulnerable about his uncertainty. I loved watching him discover this part of himself, loved being the person he trusted with his fears and doubts and revelations. We had hard conversations too, about what we wanted from the relationship, about our pasts and our futures, about the reality of being two men in love in a world that didn't always celebrate that. But we had those conversations together, honestly and openly, building something real and lasting. By Christmas, we'd essentially moved in together, though we kept both apartments because neither of us was ready to give up that security. But most nights we fell asleep in the same bed, wrapped around each other, and most mornings we woke up together. His family invited me to Christmas, and this time there was no pretense. I was introduced as Miles's boyfriend, and the word felt natural and right. My own family knew too. I'd called my parents and told them about Miles, about how he'd invited me to Thanksgiving, about how everything had changed. They were happy for me, eager to meet him, already planning a visit. On New Year's Eve we stayed in, just the two of us. We cooked dinner together in his kitchen, dancing to music playing from his phone, stealing kisses between stirring and chopping. At midnight, we stood on his balcony, watching fireworks light up the city sky, his arms wrapped around me from behind. A year ago, I never could have imagined this, I said. Being here, being with you, being this happy. He turned me around to face him, his hands cupping my face. A year ago, I didn't even know this was possible, he said. But now I can't imagine my life without you in it. We kissed as the fireworks exploded around us, and I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. This thing between us, it had started with a simple Thanksgiving invitation, with Miles telling his family I was important before either of us fully understood what that meant. But it had become so much more. It had become love, real and deep and transformative. It had become home. Looking back now, I realize that sometimes the most important moments in our lives don't announce themselves. They come disguised as ordinary invitations, as casual conversations, as simple acts of kindness. Miles inviting me to Thanksgiving was all of those things, but it was also the moment everything changed. It was the moment we both found the courage to be honest, to be vulnerable, to reach for something we'd been afraid to want. And that honesty, that vulnerability, that courage, it gave us this. A relationship built on trust and authenticity. A love that feels both unexpected and inevitable. A future that stretches out before us, full of possibility and promise. So yeah, my straight neighbour invited me to Thanksgiving, told his family I was important, and changed my entire life. Except he wasn't straight, and I wasn't just important. I was everything, and he was everything to me too. Sometimes the best love stories are the ones that surprise us, the ones that unfold when we least expect them, the ones that require us to be brave enough to tell the truth. This was ours, and I wouldn't change a single moment.